my father was in his 70s, I reminded him frequently about all the anecdotes that he used to tell us about his family history and his father and grandfather and all the things that he used to do. And eventually bullied him into writing an autobiography, which he finished when he was about 75. And he called the book Some Fell on Stony Ground, which was an indication of the fact that not everything in his life had gone particularly well, but it was just an indication of what the story was about. When I got to the same sort of age as he was when he did that, I thought, well, the very least I can do is leave something for my own children and grandchildren so that they know what I've been up to during a lot of my life. And here it is, in the deep end. And I've tried to tell it in a fairly light sort of way. Hopefully it'll be a decent read. Hopefully my family will enjoy reading it, even if anybody else doesn't. Well, I lived 54 years in this lovely old house. Really enjoyed it too. And I hired the farm for £4 an acre in the Michaelmas of 1958. And it sounds very cheap at the moment, the way rents are at the moment, but that was the price at the time. The trouble was, even at that price, we didn't have an awful lot of money to spend. At that time, my wife and I were living on £8 a week, which is all we can afford to bring out of to take out of the farm. And of that, £5 a week was devoted to paying a hire purchase agreement on the bedroom suite. So we were living on £3 a week, and we had a young baby to feed as well. So we weren't exactly flushed with money. And one day my wife was busy looking after a gang of women who were picking beans for Birdseye, which they were freezing at Great Yarmouth. And I was busy in the farmyard here doing some plastering of a grain pit that I was trying to make. And a Jaguar car pulled up at the roadside where my wife Lorna was, and said, the driver said, "Where's David Richardson?" And she said, "He's down in the farmyard." And this green Jaguar came down and found me here, and out of it got a little chubby man called Dick Joyce. Now I recognised him because I'd seen him on my father's television, and he was becoming famous as the presenter of the farming diary programme which Anglia Television had recently started. I recognised him because we didn't have our own television here at the time. It was 4 years before we had electricity and were able to have our own set. Anyway, he came over, he said, "Are you David Richardson?" I said, "Yes." Well, he said, "I'm looking for somebody to do a television programme or two with me." I said, "Oh yes, why is that?" Well, he said, "We want to put a bit of farming on a new programme that we're about to do called About Anglia." And I said, "Well, I really don't have a lot of time." I was thinking about my £3 a week and the time it would take away from the farm. And he, quickly realising the situation I was in, said, we could pay you, you know. And I said, "Well, how much would you pay me?" And he said, "Well, about 7 guineas per item." Well, I said, "How long would that take me?" "Oh, 2 or 3 hours." Well, I said, "You're on. We can do that at that price. This will more than treble my income, my spendable income, in one afternoon's work." He said, "Hold on, boy," he said. "You can't just take it on just like that. You're going to have an audition." Oh dear, I thought. Well, I never liked exams and thought I'd make a mess of this. But anyway, the arrangement was made, and I went into the studios in Norwich, and I was ushered into this great big room with a pool of light up one corner. And there sat Dick on an easy chair and another empty chair beside him, with bits of machinery being pushed around in front of him, which obviously were television cameras. They were very big in those days. And I sat down, and Dick said, "What have you been doing on the farm this week then?" And I told him, and we talked for about 5 or 6 minutes. And he said, "Well, that's David," he said, "I think that's probably enough." He said, "We'll let you know." I said, "Fine, but what about this audition I was going to have?" "Well, blast, boy, you just had it," he said. And so that was the best way it could obviously have happened, and I was signed up, and it's all sort of went on from there, really. And so 54 or 5 years later, here we still are on the farm. This is the farmyard. We used to have beef cattle in here, and then we had pigs in here. Now we've got horses in here, as you can tell, and it's called diversification. Because when I started, we were very fortunate in that the war hadn't long been over. The ration book was still fairly well known in people's memories, and food was not in surplus at all. And so there was a determination by governments and all sorts of people to maximise the production of food for the population of this country. And we do need to have a balance between production and stability of prices and profitability of farming, which can be done at the same time as the environment is enhanced and looked after. It is achievable. So although a lot of this book is humorous anecdotes and all sorts of other things that have happened to me during my very fortunate life, I've also tried to put in some of the criticisms which I've just expressed into this book as well, and hopefully a few people might read it and take notice of it.